from the Cape with bass with Daniel Leeds.
So today we're hanging with great bass player Shaun Johannes. Shaun, thank you so much for your time and thank you for allowing us into your space. We have a list of questions that we're going to ask you. First and foremost, can you tell us about your first musical experience, please?
Okay, well, firstly, thank you for having me. This is always fun. It's nice to be a part of these things. My first musical experience, unbelievably, is when I was about 4 or 5. My family used to go camping in Mossel Bay, which is quite random. And there was always a band that showed up on Christmas Day to come and play Christmas carols for the people there. And that was the first time where I kind of up close got to look at instruments. So that was, it's weird how that stuck in my mind considering all the stuff I've been in. But like, because I didn't come from one of those churches where there was a big musical, we had an organist maybe.
Yeah.
So we didn't come with bands and that kind of thing. So honestly, my first musical interaction probably would have been me weaseling my way onto stage trying to play the drums or something. I've got a vaguely clear memory of that.
Okay.
So yeah, not playing, not physically me playing, just my musical interaction was probably
Yeah.
that. That was probably my first thing.
Can you tell us why bass guitar specifically? What stood out from the low end for you as back in the day as a listener and as a player as well?
You know, that's the weird thing. I wasn't even vaguely interested in bass. I was a very late bloomer musically. Period. I unbelievably I played a lot of sport. And I mean, we all listen to music, and you know, it's always around. So I've always got fond memories of music, but it was never a feature thing for me really. And then when I was about 12 or 13, all of my friends were taking music lessons in school, and I never did. So I learned by ear because there was a piano there and I had time to kill.
Yeah.
And then the normal story with everybody else, I learned to play in church because there was no one there to play. I played in Sunday school and I did all that kind of thing. So I was a pianist for the bulk of my musical upbringing, which I'm grateful for actually. And I only so when in 1999 we started the Little Giants. I was the founder member there with a few other people.
Okay.
Which thankfully is still going on now today, which is amazing actually. And I was the pianist, and then the usual story, we didn't have a bass player. So I go, okay, look, I'm curious, I'm best to learn the bass. And also at this time I was taking lessons at the jazz workshop, and I had to sit and wait on my lesson after the time. There were always basses standing there. So I'd pick one up, fiddle a bit, put it back. And then, you know, the one started overtaking the other kind of, but the big shift was that the Little Giants, we were put together to play at the Jazzathon that year, the 1999. So there was no bass player. I started playing. What's weird is my father bought me an Academy bass, which is a brand I don't even think exists. No jack-to-jack cables. I played that thing acoustic all day. Fingers were raw, rotten to the core, with blisters. And we had to play the Jazzathon. So I remember very clearly we played, and halfway down the third song, my blisters start bleeding.
Wow.
So I go find some gaffer tape, and I couldn't slap, but I didn't have a choice because I couldn't play, so I slapped the rest of that gig, which is so weird. Anyway, what a strange memory. So that actually was my first thing with bass. So and then it obviously started taking over because I could never find a nice bass player to play with as a pianist.
Yeah.
And it's not a complaint. They were great players. I probably wasn't good enough to play with bass players.
Yeah.
So it just made more sense for me to play with bass. But also there was more of a hole. And also there are more pianists than there are bass players. So it made sense because there was a need for it. I felt, and the beauty of having been a pianist first is I didn't have to relearn music. I just had to learn to play bass, if that makes any sense. So, like around that time, I was still doing the church thing quite a lot, and going to jams. So like myself, Dylan Roman, Ramon Alexander, Spencer, Johnny Williams, we were all kind of coming up. And I thought, no, man, like there's a point where you've got to get really good.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't. I didn't know if I was going to cut it. So that half influenced my move to bass. But then, you know, like anything, the bug bit, and it's all history from there, basically. I mean, I was glad I did the move to bass. But specifically, I wasn't actually geared on bass. And then there were a handful of recordings and songs that I was like, okay, now I need to do that.
Yeah.
So like the one was... It was Edel Dyer's first album, Sonesta.
Yeah.
Eldridge Childer played bass, and then there was a track. I can't remember the title, but I remember he played. If this is still on, he played. That's the opening bass line, and then the melody was like on fretless. I remember that's what it
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
and that just I was completely stumped. That was it for me. Such a dumb thing, but so Alder really was the big,
Mm.
like, the next day I needed to get a bass. It was
Wow.
basically that.
Wow. So,
Yeah, no, and like jam sessions, watching Eddie Yoster play and watching
mm,
Alistair Andrews play, and no, it was a big thing for
mm,
me back then. So
wow.
when the bug bit, it was a
Mm.
solid bug.
Shaun, can you tell us about your musical education after? Um, did you go study music? Okay, I know, but they need to know.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah,
Look, my musical upbringing is like everybody else. I when I started playing properly, let's say, it was the same thing of playing in church.
yeah,
Church teaches you, which I now call practical musicianship, but it teaches you so much about music that a
yeah,
book just cannot teach you.
yeah, yeah.
So that thing of you learn a song, like I remember it was My Tribute, which is a heavy song to learn anyway.
And the crouch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I learned that for a Sunday school thing, and then we get to another church, and then a woman starts singing it, and now I'm supposed to be playing it, and I'm like, but she's not even in the key, vaguely near where I am, and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, but one of the two of us is gonna look dumb now, and it can't be you, so now I've got to learn.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so that kind of schooling you can't put money on. So for me, that was a lot of it, learning by ear, like by everybody else, like with everybody else. The only thing I did slightly different is I taught myself to read
Yeah.
music, which was quite a smart, inadvertently smart choice on my part. Um, and I mean the musical education. So again, I mean it's the long-winded version, but I'm not formally trained
Mm.
at all. Right? I had a handful of lessons at the jazz workshop, which I'm eternally grateful, from George Werner. But my musical upbringing, like through school and that, I never had it. I just
Yeah.
played in church. And then after high school, I mean, I started getting into clubs and stuff because George was my teacher, so he dragged me along
Okay.
to some gigs and things. So you kind of have informal lessons as such.
Yeah, yeah.
So while he's on his break, busy having his meal, I'm sitting there asking him 1,000 questions. And then I went to Grahamstown,
Okay.
the National Youth Jazz Festival. And again, I got into the very first National Youth Jazz Band. It was quite a thing, being 18, mind you. But also, I realized there that there was such a big divide between the haves and the don't haves in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of music education. So, like, I was up against, not a competition, but I was up against like Rondebosch boys and sax and those people that have music education,
Yeah, yeah.
and I didn't. So I always felt a little under. But the thing is, I could play,
Yeah.
so it's fine. That was ultimately important because you can have all the theory in the world, and it doesn't make you a good player. So then I went to study accounting in my first year.
Wow.
I know, right? And hated all of it. Then went to Grahamstown in June, and then by July I was practicing to audition for the UCT music program.
Okay.
Now, throughout all of this, I had caught on properly. I used to bunk every day. I didn't go to class. And obviously, coming from a slightly disenfranchised background, my father and I didn't speak for like a year easy because
you
I
didn't do the accounting.
it's a thing. But also being a musician back then, not unlike now, was a curse basically. I mean, you know that story. Also if you're college, you're growing up, you got to be a doctor or an accountant
yeah,
or a lawyer
yeah.
or whatever. Anyway, so that didn't happen. So I told them, look, I'm clearly not geared for this. I need to study music. So again, it was war year. I said, don't worry, I'll pay for my fees mostly. You don't have to worry. So I went and got every bursary I could, and I ended up getting a SAMRO bursary for 2 out of my 4 years, which was great. But also, I mean, they could see like I was scoring top marks out of class, and not because I was like it's not because I'm so smart. It's because I graphed. So like
Yeah,
I'd sit
yeah.
in my theory
Yeah, yeah.
exams, not knowing what they're talking about half the time, but I could play. So I could sit there and hear by playing. So in my exams, you'd see me not write off my exam. I'd literally be sitting there with my eyes closed, working out. Okay, these are the right, and then fill it in because from
Yeah.
playing so much, I could hear it almost.
Wow, this is really
Which is nuts,
This is
actually.
interesting.
No, but look, that's not first prize. That's just
Yeah.
how I got by.
Yeah,
So again, I say, by the grace of God, I'm grateful that I had piano
yeah,
really first. Because even now I'm teaching, and I teach theory, but I teach them as a pianist because, piano is theory in motion, really. You can
Yeah.
see it in front of you.
yeah, yeah.
Theory on a bass is a massive problem, actually. So, okay, so then, I mean, I went to UCT, graduated, and as a result, it opens a good couple of doors for you having a degree. But ultimately doesn't mean you can play, it just
Yeah,
means you
yeah,
have a
yeah.
degree. But then, I applied for scholarship or funding to do my master's, which I did. which was awesome. So I've got a master's, and I'm currently on the threshold of proposing a PhD.
Wow.
But I don't know if I'm ready for that heartache yet. But again, it's it sounds a bit like I'm doing it also because a lot of people, they are a lot like me.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
the anomaly. There are thousands of musicians like me, and I'm so grateful now more than ever. There's a lot of young people like me that there is a way forward. You can play music, you can study. It's all doable now more than ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, still we don't have bucks. Still, there's a whole lot of racial stuff, and that's maybe not going to change soon.
Yeah, yeah,
But that doesn't mean you can't do it.
yeah.
So yeah, that I'm half doing it because of that. Um, so on some selfless level, but also having qualifications, people take you more seriously.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like the fact that there's no like at none of the institutions or the let's say the notable universities, they don't have a contemporary African music course yet they're on the African continent.
Yeah.
So like that for me is a big issue, and they won't listen to me now with a master's. So that's half the reason I want to do a PhD
Okay.
is to say actually hang on, I do have something to say. Here's why, but it's academically sound. It's not
Yeah,
just
yeah,
me picking
yeah,
a fight. So yeah, that is my musical theory background.
Can you tell us about the albums and the artists that you worked with? First and foremost,
Yeah.
let me get you. Let me start you. You played for the legendary George Benson.
I did.
You played for the legendary Johnny Clegg.
I did.
You played for Jonathan Butler.
I did.
I want to hear all those stories.
Look, I mean, all things considered, I've had actually a short career comparatively, but quite a full one, thankfully. It's all by. I mean, look, I'm not being one of those self-deprecating people. Oh no, I can't play.
Yeah.
Look, I can play some, but the bulk of it is it's connections and your name having a connotation to it, a connection
yeah.
with it. So like the Benson gig was, so George Benson came down to the Cape Town Jazz Fest, and he was going to do 2 nights. He was going to do one night of the Benson Spectacular, which is all of the hits, all of the stuff we know him for, but he was also going to do a night of a tribute to Nat King Cole, which I didn't realize was an album actually that he did. So he came down, and they needed a double bass player because his bass player, Stanley Banks, who is a bass god in my opinion, doesn't play double bass. I mean, he can, but it's not like his
it's not-
thing.
yeah.
So I actually took the piss out of him when I met him because I said, but on that Absolute Benson DVD, there you playing a stick. He's like, yeah, and? It's like, well, I mean, hopefully this doesn't make it to air, but they got another guy to record it. But I mean, he did play on the gig. He can play. It's just not his course, basically. So he didn't want to play it anyway. So it was all of these jazz proper, like the Nat King Cole songbook. So like Unforgettable, Rambling Rose, all the hits. And that, for me, that was, I mean, I met George Benson, which was cool and all. But I honestly, all due respect, I was far more excited about meeting his band.
Okay.
Because like his MD has been Randy Waldman since before I was born, and that guy's a musical legend / genius. He's just everything, and like his drummer was Oscar Seaton, who plays with Lionel Richie and Lee Ritenour. He's done it all. So like his band is like that, and I mean it's like the Stanley Bank. So it was a thing for me, and more than that, I got to play. Like we've heard Unforgettable a million times. I got to play the actual score.
Wow.
So to see the guys written notes, I mean it's a photocopy, obviously not the original.
Yeah.
But like I got to play that song. So
And
that
you connect.
well, yeah, that was the weird thing. I mean, Benson, I saw fleetingly. He came onto stage, soundcheck left. It's about as much as I got to see the guy. So that was unfortunate. But just the being in that machine was a spectacular thing. Wow. The Clegg gig was again by referral. So his sax player at the time was Daniel Shout, and they had a gig coming up that the actual bass player could make. You know the usual story. So they're like, okay, well, Daniel's like, well, I got a guy who can do this, gig, whatever. So let's say the gig was December. I got booked in like July or August. I must have, I bought like 2 DVDs, 3 CDs, got all the charts. So I transcribed everything. I got the set list of what they might play.
Yeah.
So it's obviously more than what they would have done. I learned it all cold. I learned the BVs. I learned the choreography. You can ask my mother. I was sitting here day in, day out learning that music because Johnny Clegg is like a thing for me.
Yeah.
My earliest memory is when he's the guy from Savuka died. And this was when I was sub B because I remember sitting watching Good Morning South Africa.
Okay.
And they interviewed him. So grade 2 for those of you. And I remember clearly that conversation of his, and the song just like I was in tears. I was what 7 years old, 8 years old, because the song was so, which is the crossing.
Yeah,
That song.
yeah,
And that again was the highlight for me. Like I had not met them at all. I didn't get
Yeah.
a rehearsal, nothing. I literally walked in cold, which was a stressful situation
Yeah, yeah.
altogether. And the first time I saw them, they had walked in on stage. So I'm standing by my amp. We were about to perform. I had never met anybody, but I knew the music.
yeah.
So it was one of those things where you look to the Lord, you just hope for the best. And again, while the gig's on, I'm standing there nearly in tears again. So when the crossing comes on and I get to play it, I'm like, and for them it's like the umpteenth gig. They couldn't be bothered. And then I think the biggest compliment I got, which was actually just, I think it was Johnny turning around, or yeah, I think it was Johnny turning around, looking at me because I had played something obviously. And he just gave me a smile, and I was like, yo, Johnny Clegg. I still get like that. It's actually pretty dumb. So I've been playing with him on and off. So the usual story, I'm super dip. When his bass player can't make it, then they phone me and I rock up. So I've had a couple of very nice things, very sporadic, very random. But the one highlight, massive highlight for me, was I got to play his final concert on the final tour.
Wow.
That was a big thing. That was, I mean, to literally get to do there's the end of an illustrious career, and I get to play. That for me was huge. So that was cool. And then the Butler gig also was. I mean, I've known Jonathan Butler. We all do, I've been singing that guitar solo from Lies since I was 4 years old. I still remember going to Chris singing it the one morning. It's so random. The Butler gig again was by referral because generally speaking, when he comes to Cape Town, he usually brings the MD along and then books people. But it's usually, it's the same folks. It'll be Camilo or what's his face, Mornay, or it'll be, and they're good players. I mean, it's not a complaint or anything. It's like they are legitimately good players, so it makes sense to keep using the same people. But I think he wanted to do more of a memory lane situation, so they wanted a double bass player, and I suppose one of the few ones in our circles that play double bass. And then there was also the reading part of it because you got no time to sit and put the songs together.
Yeah.
So that also was such a whirlwind little tour because again, like you get to play all the songs you grew up with. For me, like playing Sera was like one of the best things. Lies was cool. I mean, I've played that a million times, around the clubs and that stuff. But to play a handful of like Falling in Love or like it's just like that was the thing for me. And the big thing to come out of that tour was meeting Kevin Teasley, who was the MD that he brought from the States.
Okay.
He's the guy, all the Iron Man trailers, and he is the MD for like the Super Bowl show for Jennifer Lopez or Janet Jackson.
Wow.
So Kevin Teasley was a great connection to make, which again was the nice thing. And also, I mean, you get to play with Butler, man. Yes, it's a thing. Once you play with him, you realize why. Yeah, it's a thing. I cannot lie.
Yeah. Albums that you worked on.
I mean,
Just
again,
a few.
it sounds like a brag, but I've been lucky to record with hundreds and thousands. But again, it's not like a. What's weird is, like the popular albums are not the ones I'm happiest about. Like it's usually the albums that don't even make it to print.
Yeah.
That leave a mark with me. Like just yesterday, arguments like there was. I do Starlight Classics every year. It's a show that happens in Somerset West, big R&B Rand Merchant Bank thing. And it got aired last night on TV. I missed it. I fell asleep on Friday. Not last night. So there's an example of. I mean, I've done Starlight for the last decade, and it always kind of goes to tape, and it always.
Yeah.
But some albums. I mean, I've done Steve Dyer albums. I've done Vicky Sampson albums. I've done.
So you name them.
Kinda. I know it sounds like a horrible brag, but I mean, I've done a lot of recordings, and I've also done a lot of shows that have been recorded.
Yeah.
So, like, as to my own discography, it's pretty lengthy, but it's so many random things, and I'm actually kind of grateful.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's not just jazz stuff. I love jazz, don't get me wrong. But, like, a lot of it is, like, just nice pop music or nice country music. Or so, I'm lucky that I can do a variety. And especially now with lockdown, we've done 1,000 collaborations, because we can't get out to each other. So that's been a very fun time now, as I've done like a good couple of tracks with people. That has been cool. I mean, the artist list is also lengthy because I used to play in a lot of those Skouspel shows. So it's like everybody and anybody. The Afrikaans world, a lot of, I mean, the things I'm happiest about, again, I did a Clegg gig in Durban. And I got to watch Soul Brothers play. And that was a huge thing for me because as a keyboard player, watching Black Moses play Hammond B3 in that style was it just rocked my world. So yeah, I mean, I know it's not a decent answer, but you can check my website. There's probably a list there, but there's it's too lengthy to mention. But they've been some interesting projects actually, which has been great.
Can you tell us about your gear that you're using? I know about this MTD bass. Wow.
Yes.
I've actually you um told me I could touch it. I actually played it earlier. Wow, awesome bass. I never thought in my life that I would actually
No,
touch an
man.
MTD. And then you also with Sire basses.
Mm.
And then also I see you having the Mark bass amps. Can you tell us about all of that, please?
Sure. So again, like everybody else, I've also had tons of crap gear and tons
Yeah.
of, and again, I say crap. It's only crap because the things usually break. But
Yeah, yeah,
any piece of gear you have at that time is perfect.
yeah.
I've had currently the best amp I own is a little PV 10-inch Minx
Wow.
that lives under my desk. So if everything else breaks, you can throw the thing down a flight of stairs. It'll work every single time. So that like, just saying that again, a lot of the stuff is metal and wood, so you can have. It can be the world's greatest bass. If you play it badly, it plays badly. Having said that, like I've gone through, like I'm a massive advocate for chord guitars because the very first guitars I owned, with the exception of the Academy that we spoke about earlier, was chord basses. They are bang for your buck every time, and they seem to be improving as time goes on. So I will give a shout out to them, even though for no reason they're just good. Ibanez basses are always just a little bit more expensive for chords for some reason, and they sound amazing. But the thing that I was a like I'd never owned an Ibanez. So I've owned Quartz, I've owned Warwicks, which I love. My stage streamer, one of the best guitars I've had. And then, so like the MTD I got, I don't play six string. I never did. I was always 4-string, 5-string guy. And then I remembered watching obviously Andre Goucher because he's the greatest of all time pretty much. And then I remember meeting Justin Rains and they came down for that Israel DVD. Yeah, and then I saw he played MTD, and I mean obviously it sounded amazing because it's Justin Rains. And then I went researching it because at this point, there, there's a certain standard you gotta. So if everybody reaches a certain standard, but your sound kinda has to match up.
Yeah.
And inferior sound is a relative description because what then is the perfect sound doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But so what I actually was getting at was I was on the threshold of ordering a Yamaha TRB JP2 because that, in my opinion, is the best bass guitar mass produced in the planet.
Yeah.
Hands down. There's nothing you couldn't play with a Yamaha bass by a long shot. And then I had emailed, just on a whim, I had emailed Mike Tobias through his website and said, look, I'm a little muso from Cape Town. I travel around a bit. I get to do stuff. But, I mean, I can't afford your basses. That's the short version. I just can't. So he said, like, would you then consider me paying it off for a while? I mean, if it takes 10 years, would you be okay with it? He said, no, sure, fine. So, eventually I was burst into tears immediately, obviously. I sound like a big chunky belly, but, it's a big deal.
I can imagine.
Because these basses, as you can see, that's his signature on there. So they are custom-made guitars. They are not factory-produced guitars. And it's a little workshop. It's not even... Anyway, so...
I saw you were there.
Yeah, that was also remarkable. That whole trip was remarkable. The thing about, like, you could then... So I get photos from Mike Tobias about what kind of wood I want. So here's an 80-year-old poplar, whatever. And I'm like, it's amazing. You can make me whatever. I'll love it.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing, attention to detail, like all of the stuff I've always ever wanted in a buck that I've read up about and could never get because we just don't have them.
Yeah.
I kind of threw it all into one guitar. I said, make me the biggest, baddest bass you can make. I'll take that one. And then I was picky and I said, okay, I want bird's eye maple fingerboard and I want buzz and tuning. All the crap I read about. No, what I was talking about. And I knew then that he and Bill Bartolini, who again for me is like the leading pickup manufacturer in my opinion, they had designed their own pickup thing. But also Mike's history is vast. I mean, he's gone from Fender to Tobias basses. It's Mike Tobias. I mean, if you think of Tobias basses, that's 90s gospel for me. And those basses are spectacular.
I believe he was there before Gibson bought the company.
Yeah, so Gibson bought him out, and then he kind of got stuck to the shape, and he was like, actually, you know what? Nah, I'm going to make my own thing. I'm glad he did. Anyway, so like, the MTD thing, and then the amazing part is he actually charged me half. He just said, look, I have faith in you, it's fine. Yeah, just, I'm only taking 2 payments off, just, that's fine. So that was, I can't explain to you the feeling. And then at the same time, I'd gone to Sweden to go play there, and I came across Mark bass amps. And I played through a small one, not even this size one, and it just was everything. Because you'll know this as a player, like, when your amp is on 5, it's too loud, but the tone is lekker.
Yeah.
but you have to play it like 2 maybe, because that's bearable for the room you're in. But
Yeah.
then your tone kind of
Yeah, yeah,
dies.
yeah, yeah.
These amps don't do that. You see this amp is sitting on 2 at the moment now, and it's, it sounds amazing. So then I harassed them. I said I needed to get one because by then I had bought, like, I'm not an endorsee by anybody at this point. And I'd owned tons of gear. Like, you see my
Yeah,
SWR is still here. I used to have a hotkey, the big one with
Yeah, I
the
remember that one,
graphic.
yeah.
Love that amp. And I'd been given a 4x10 by Mike Campbell, used to be the head of UCT. He gave me a cabinet, which is amazing. And then I emailed them, and they were starting to ship them into South Africa through Music Connection,
Okay.
which is Anton Stella, who was running it back then. And I had forged a relationship, just saying, look, same story. Look, I can't afford your gear.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
mind if I pay it off? He's like, sure. And then, he, instead of ship down a small amp, he sends me a 4x10, a 2x10, amp head, cables, the works. I was like, and around that time, Rixie Roman, Andrew Roman, he was here doing a barnyard show. And we had been, Rixie's a spectacular player. Anyway, but we've been, so he came to play, and he was also just completely gobsmacked. And it all happened literally in the same day. They both arrived.
Wow.
The Mark Bass gear and the MTD arrived the same day. So it was meant to be, I'd like to
Yeah,
think. And since then, I've had relationships with these companies that are just like, and it's not a thing of, I expect free gear. That's the last thing I want. Is I'm actually just honoring their kindness to begin with.
Yeah.
And truthfully, it's amazing gear. Like, I've traveled, like, doing all of those tours with Johnny Clegg. One of the big pet hates I have is when I go touring. Here's your tech rider. You're not going to get that. You're going to get an Ampeg SVT that's half broken, and that's
Yeah,
So having a Mark Bass F500 amp, which is like literally this big, in my backpack, iPad for charts, it's all in there, and I can record and play. And so half the time I get to festivals, I walk in, put my guitar down, unplug the cables, plug it into my amp, and you get your sound 100% of the time. So that was invaluable. And then, like, the Sire basses came about because, again, it was the same thing. I'd seen Jackie Clark, a phenomenal, amazing bass player from Memphis in the States, and he was playing them, and he was just getting this, like, it's the Marcus sound without doing much. You can literally just put it on, and there it is. And again, all due respect to Fender, like, I own Fenders. You, as a bass player, you've got to own some Fenders. And there's just some things that are inherently, let's say, problematic with their guitars. And Sire kind of fixed those things for me. So, like, small things like if you're playing on your 5th fret on the G string, that note's a little softer than the others. There's a weird wobbly balance, like a 5-string Fender Jazz always sounds woolly on that 5th string. Sire basses don't. So what they've done is they've tightened everything up, it sounds like. The pickups are all, they've slightly tweaked to give you that Marcus sizzle and slap. Obviously, that's why you buy it. But besides that, the amount of, the quality of the workmanship for the price is ridiculous. And I can't say it enough. Like, that's like high-end boutique gear to an extent, but at a fraction of the cost.
Wow.
So if you're looking for, like, a Fender American Deluxe, it'll set you back easily anywhere between 25 to 40K without batting an eyelid. These, when you ship them in plus tax, even now with a horrible exchange rate, at worst you're looking at paying 20 grand. If that. I mean, that's only because customs here nails you, and the exchange rate now with shipping is ridiculous. But I own a V7, the M7, which is like my Warwick used to be. Because they're kind of generic, 2 soap bar pickups, not too specific sounding. And a fretless, obviously, because I have to own a fretless. But I've owned, I had an Ernie Ball Music Man fretless for the longest time, which I think is still one of the best basses I've ever owned. But yeah, also, like, I've got a 78 Fender Jazz that I bought from Music Mate's owner back in the day.
Okay.
He was selling it for some. And then there was, I've got a 1958 reissue Mexican, which I just, P-bass, which I love. And again, it's tools for the trade. I mean, it's not like, you get those people that are gear collectors, and usually, I know it's a bit mean, but if I see with great gear, I usually think, probably can't play. Because you've got time to sit and collect gear, you're probably not practicing. Anyway, it's just rubbish, really, but I always just make that. But, like, there's still some gear I wish I could have, like, Hookal, again, Eldred Shoulder plays on a Ibanez Musician, that big chunky one with the 2 stripes down the. If I could get my hands on one of those, I'd pay top dollar for that. It's a never-ending search. Even my double bass, I mean, it's hard to find double basses in South Africa, period. So mine is like, I used to have others, like I used to have an electric upright that I got made for me, which was amazing, because it helped me learn to play double properly. And then I've had a plywood, which I sold, and the solid wood I kept, which is the one you see behind you now. They're just rare. It's just hard to find. So if you can get one, get one. then yeah, I don't think. And then I mean, there's pedals for days.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
used to have the usual. Everyone's got an ME50 at some point. I've had the GT6, which I love and sold recently, but as gear goes by, I mean, I don't have a lot of money to spend on them, and as a bass player, you don't
Yeah.
really need a lot of pedals.
Yeah.
But again, it's tools for the trade, because I always play multiple basses on gigs. It's either this and a fretless, or double and this. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I always need two channels in a pedal. That's going to be a game changer, and the one has to have EQ, because the EQ for a double is nowhere near the EQ for an electric.
Yeah.
So getting the bass switch was one of the best thing I could have done. Rupert Musical Instruments, Jacques Rupert is a legend who built these. It's all got Layla components and all that. The company doesn't exist anymore, actually. He doesn't make these, and he himself was a bass player, which was a big thing for me.
Okay.
So it's kind of the brain for EQ and then running effects and stuff. And the effects are always going to be, I mean, as a bass player, you're always going to have an envelope filter. You just want that funky wah vibe. That's always going to happen. I have a compressor, and not because I use it a lot, but it's because I know my gear is going to go out. Like, a lot of my shows are recorded.
Yeah.
And I don't often use compression, but like I don't have a boost pedal, so if I solo and stuff, then it can kind of get lost a little bit. So I use the compressor just a little, just to pick up my signal, and also for slapping and popping. I don't want to kill the PA.
Yeah.
So then, I've got the compressor on slightly. The best pedal I own is my tuner. Firstly, because it's backlit, and also I can change. So when you're playing with an orchestra in the winter, they'll tune down or they'll tune up to 442.
Okay.
Or they'll tune down to 438. So you need a tuner that can shift, because I've had it before where it was one of those core tuners that don't, they just tune.
Yeah.
And the orchestra was here, so my whole gig I was out of tune essentially. So that's a thing. And then the usual suspects, like octave pedal for me is a must-have. The wah. The only other thing I have is the Zoom B3 just for effects, because I don't use reverb and chorus and that stuff enough to warrant buying a whole pedal. But I am changing that opinion, because the things I use more are like a decent reverb, and so I might buy that little Hall of Fame TC Electronic, which is a brilliant pedal actually. But yeah, generally it's usually dry, but the thing I use that's most important is the bass switch for 2 channels. But I'm more concerned about the signal. So like, even if I go to studio, my Mark bass is always with me, because the head itself as a preamp is gold.
Wow.
So even if you just put it on, it's going to help out your tone. It makes it a bit warmer, it's a bit tighter. So whenever I do shows like the Starlight Classics thing, they'll take a signal from my amp first, and then I usually just send it back in, so they can have the effects separate.
Okay.
So if they want a dry signal, because again, it is a show that gets recorded, but it is also a live show.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have a muddy, weird.
Yeah.
So I want front house to be clean and pure, and then they can have a second signal with the effects, and then they can always hear what went through my amp. So I'm conscious of what I have to do when I'm playing live. And whether it's recorded or not, I can't have the same treatment. But the one piece of kit that I do have that has helped me, like last year I went touring to Holland, doing the Joseph Clark Queen show.
Yeah.
And I bought myself the Boss GT1B, which is a lovely little pedal. So it's the GT6 on steroids in a small footprint. So again, it's for the same scenario. I can put that, my Mark bass, all that stuff in my luggage, and I get my sound 100% of the time. So that is a big deal for me. But luckily, that also serves as a sound card.
Yeah.
So I had my laptop, my guitar, and pedal, so I could still continue with the work that I'm doing at home. So whether I'm doing charts or tracks, it could all still happen. So I was very grateful for that, actually. Good piece of kit. Yeah.
Can you give any advice for young up-and-coming bass players and musicians out there, please?
Look, it's an odd one, because coming up now is weird. There seem to be fewer gigs, there seem to be fewer venues. Musicians are generally speaking marginalized in that regard as it pertains to the entertainment industry. The fees don't match the effort and that kind of thing. So, with all of that in mind, like for me, if I wasn't a musician, I would have been a miserable person. So I think the biggest piece of advice is to actually just stay the course, like stick to your guns. If it feels right, it probably is right. You can't practice enough. You can always work. If I get a chance to practice, I practice scales 9 times out of 10, because it's something that I could always improve on.
Yeah.
So practicing fundamentals is super important. Sit with a metronome as much as you can. Work on your theory as much as you can. And even if you feel like it's going nowhere and you're just spinning your wheels, do it anyway, because any time spent is going to be helpful. I say that, however, You can practice for 4 hours of stuff you can already play, or you can practice for 30 minutes of stuff you can't play.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's also that kind of practice that is crucial. But the biggest thing I find more than anything that really affects our people is, we get stuck in a musical rut
Yeah.
without realizing it. So all the light is now all checking out the neo soul thing and the American stuff, and that's cool because you must, but don't stay there.
Yeah, yeah.
Like one of the reasons, like again, I'm not the world's best player by any stretch, but I think the thing that works in my favor is I've played a lot of varying things. So
Yeah.
at some point in my life, I've grafted a lot of salsa stuff and a lot of Cuban stuff, and then
Yeah, yeah.
another part of my life was all gospel stuff. And so um, the thing is, you're still the same musician, but your application of the knowledge you have will change.
Yeah.
So what's nice is some of it may infiltrate in a good way, some may infiltrate in a bad way, but the fact is you've got a wider selection of stuff you can choose from.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm always a fan of, like, I'm not a big slap bass player, but I can.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's more musical choice to not do so
Mhm.
than to go, because a lot of people go, oh no, I don't like it, which is
Yeah,
usually code for I can't do it,
Yeah.
and so I don't like it. So I'm usually a fan of having a skill set for all of it and choosing what you do.
Yeah.
So even though I suppose I primarily kind of came up as playing jazz stuff, that isn't what I play every day. I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I had to choose music to play tomorrow, it would probably be like the Temptations much sooner than would be John Coltrane.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just a fact for me.
Mhm.
I love jazz, don't get me wrong, but
Mm.
it's not my. If I had to die tomorrow, it wouldn't be it.
Yeah.
So I think the advice would be, just from a playing point of view, is be as diverse as you can be, but check it out thoroughly. Don't learn
Yeah,
it in a
yeah.
shallow capacity. Try and learn it. And again, the world's different now because you have the internet.
Yeah.
So having access to information is so much easier, but a lot of it is not true. So not everything is gold.
Yeah,
So that's the one downside with having a lot of information. And I think the instant gratification part of Googling and that stuff don't make the players as hungry as like when we were coming out. I don't know what it was like for you. Like I'd get stuff on cassette maybe once a month from
Yeah,
somebody.
hey.
I've worn cassettes out
Yeah.
practicing it.
Yeah.
So that for me was a big deal. Was the yeah, just diversifying, playing everything, and it all is valid. It all counts. I mean, you can practice and learn what all the cool kids are doing,
Yeah, yeah.
but to what end? Then that's all they play.
Mm.
And I could always tell. Like I used to go to jam sessions, and the ones are always just playing the same songs. And I'm like, okay, cool, but kind of losing the essence of the jam session. For
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
It's about meeting new people that you haven't played with,
Yeah, yeah.
instead of playing with people you already play with, and just showing everybody you can play. That kind of defeated the purpose for me. So from a playing point of view, it's being as diverse as you can. But from a personal point of view, it's a lot of old world traditions that I think have gone missing now. So just a general respect for people. Your word is your bond.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a big one for me. So if you say, the gig's at 7 on the 10th of December 2021, I'm probably going to be there at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
We don't have to discuss it another day. I will
Yeah,
be there.
yeah,
And that's just my nature. The few times that I've not been there, or something's gone horribly wrong, the
Yeah.
chance of me missing something is just impossible.
Mm.
Always be prepared, always be on time, always have more than you need. And this is a
Yeah.
musical point of view, never mind gear. Like I've always got a gig bag in my car with random gaffer tape, glue, cable ties, extra jack to jack, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can never have too much of that stuff. And then just old world things. I don't know why I'm saying old world. It should be current, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
that a
understand.
lot of that goes a long way, because your name you can tarnish once or twice and then it's done.
Yeah.
It's hard to. I mean, unfortunately, we have a case now that's coming up at the end of the month of a musician who spent his whole career teaching a lot of young people, and is an amazing musician, amazing person. But you get one chance to tarnish your name. So if he's going to get another gig anytime soon, I just don't know. And that's unfortunate. So that is a very rough version, I suppose, of your name is really all you've got.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got to try and maintain that, and also the people. You have to kind of be respectful of them. So if you recommend me for a gig, I've got to do the best I can for
Yeah,
your name.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
It
just the
makes perfect
honorable thing to
sense,
do.
yeah.
So yeah, if that was my advice, it would be that.
Wow. Shaun, thank you so much for your time, brother.
pleasure.
I
Thank you for asking.
honor this moment because yeah, I mean it's just a great moment, and Godspeed on your journey ahead.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Man, thank you.
No,
Let's
thank
do
you.
this.
you for watching this video. Please like and share this video with your family and friends. Please follow From the Cape with Bass on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. Thank you so much. God bless you.